Concentric. I'd say better late than never, which is true. And I apologize for being late. Lost track of some time zones in the transition. I've got big news for everyone tonight, and it's good to be here. A lot of great project stuff going on. I think we've finally catalyzed the disconnects, I'll put it that way, to start to be talking to some real entities who are ready to go to work. And I'll give some updates on that as we go. But I am talking to you live right now from Windhoek, Namibia. And I believe I'm reconnected now. Let's turn the volume up. See if that helps. It's about as high as you can go. I will try to talk a little bit louder. Yes, it was frozen for a moment. I think we lost our Wi-Fi signal. We're getting all that set up new here in Southwest Africa. And those of you who have been following us know that we spent 2 trips into Tunisia, and we've had a couple of very brief layover trips now in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, but this is really the first deep dive into sub-Saharan Africa. And there's some amazing opportunities there in North Africa, and it is kind of an extension of the Middle East. In fact, the times in Tunis, it really is just what you would think geographically. It's a combination of Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. And regarding that volume, you guys give me 1 second here. I'm going to put in a headpiece that I think can fix that. So bear with me just a moment, and we'll try to remedy that situation. Hold on just a second. We're live to you from Namibia, Africa. Okay. I'll get into the details. Uh, we are live from Windhoek, Namibia, in Southwest Africa, deep Southwest, basically bordering South Africa. Essentially, Namibia is due north of Cape Town. Tunisia is amazing. Our business there is slated to be called. Thank you, Rod. Thanks for the feedback. We're getting a good combination. We are going to continue to work on the audio visual. We've got a lot of substance going on in this company. And by the way, Rod Friesen, thank you so much for taking the time to go down to Salem. I guess, would that be your yesterday? Yeah, it'd be your morning the 11th. So your yesterday. For us, that was a full, more than 24 hours ago. Great to get that feedback, and I'll get into more details in a minute. But some of you might recall also the Brooks, Oregon waste to energy plant that we were actually involved in building back the first time around. This is even back in the 1980s and into the 90s with the old Ogden Martin, who became Covanta, then Reworld. And as some of you are aware, that plant was shut down mainly for environmental reasons, right? It was a situation where the it was kind of a sort of a forced comedy of not errors, not even a comedy, but just kind of forcing a perfect storm by essentially telling a waste to energy plant operator who had backed themselves into a corner to simply use medical waste as their fuel, which its heating value and energy production is not nearly as good as other municipal solid waste. So Reworld for years it has simply been running that on a big tipping fee and pretty lousy plant performance and power output, and finally just shut the plant down when they were faced with um, some environmental restraints that essentially just created a scenario where the only thing that would possibly work would be a no pollution. And lo and behold, that's what Concentric had been working on and perfecting for all these years. And this was even before the graphene utilization, right? We're simply capturing the flue gases not from pyrolysis, but from any power generation which uses the fuels from pyrolysis. And then we still get the byproduct of graphene, which amplifies the revenues and profits astronomically and makes that huge difference. So the cool part here is that since that plant in Brooks has not been operating, everyone in the 7 county area, all the way out to the Pacific Ocean there, west of Salem, is scrambling to not have to send the garbage out to Arlington, the Eastern Oregon landfill. Obviously, for transportation costs get huge there. So they've been predominantly bringing that to Coffin Butte landfill in Corvallis, which is now under a lot of environmental pressure. People said they want to expand the landfill, take out a service road, and really make it a big challenge. Yeah, and what Rod's bringing up too there, you guys see that is we still want to do that Salem site. The funny part, and maybe some state influence will come on there, is that the current owners, Reworld, instead of saying, "Hey, there's better technology, let's advance with it," because they certainly could, they've taken the position that they don't want to have something done better because it would show up what they're doing. Wealthy way to look at things. But their response to it, like, and they don't come out with an exact statement like that, because no one would say that. Like, we don't want to be better because so if someone's better, we're just going to not let it happen because we don't want to look bad. I mean, no one's going to say it that way. But their actions speak louder than words because what they did basically, they were looking at 15 to 25 million in restoration costs for the property. And we came to them and said, hey, just at first, hey, give it to us for nothing. We'll take all the liability off your hands. You get to go free and clear, which we thought that would motivate them to say, hey, what do these guys got up their sleeve? Let's check it out. They never did. Instead, they came back and said, well, our lawyers said you guys got to bring in 50 million up front and have that in pay it to us, and then we keep it. And it's our insurance costs that you would restore the property. And it's like, wow, how to turn an opportunity into just a litigious anchor, and that's what they've done. So we're still in dialogue there, and maybe the state will revamp it. Yeah, great property, the one in Brooks, Oregon, existing waste energy facility, perfect retrofit. Also, the Coffin Butte landfill, we could restore that and clean that up. Would be an amazing opportunity. We're calling that Camilla Corvallis. In fact, as a young engineer, before I became an engineer, I was studying to be one at Oregon State. We actually took fuel samples, MSW fuel samples from that landfill and did bomb calorimeter tests at Oregon State University. That was part of Dwight Bushnell's courses. So yeah, we're all about all those things. And Rod, again, thank you for going down there. Republic Services, a good landfill operating company, I believe mainly in the Western United States. Their headquarters are in Phoenix. They've got a bunch of landfills all throughout. I respect that company a lot, and we really hope to do some work with them. We can come in and, I'll even explain this in some of you've seen is with the graphene revenues, these projects can be so profitable that we can offer double-digit slipstream revenues and profit sharing to governments and entities like Republic, because after all, if they're not there, we couldn't be there. Someone is doing the work to bring the waste there and do these things. We think some of that should be valued. And that's why we say we'll give you value for that. You keep your tipping fees and we'll do some profit distributions with you. And the exciting part about that whole approach, it's called the all game sum, right? Instead of the zero sum game. And the exciting part about it is really we're seeing manifest not only across the world, and some of you've seen this in one word on the status of things, and we're going to be making this stuff available more and more. But some of you are aware, in one word, maps and legends, two words there really, but maps, number one. We've been able to put these interactive maps together that we used to have for where projects were, and we'll get that on the website later, and people can go on and maybe even see live video footage, that kind of stuff. And there'll be permissives, to see you can get into control room data and all that kind of stuff. All the control systems and engineering troubleshooting, a lot of things that would not have been possible 20 years ago are more than possible now. And it's how we can create this global distributed network of similar operating plants from the hardware to even the software for the monitoring. But to get there, I've always said our favorite and best part of these plants is running them, right? That's where you generate those cash flows. But to take the revenue to have that ongoing, you've got to first build the plant. And to build it, you've got to engineer it. To engineer it, you got to permit it, and all that. And you got to finance and do all those things. So you got to do all these other steps to get to the point where you can have not just passive income, but residual permanent cash flows. And that's what we built towards. And the model's set and it's in place and it's been done. And a lot of it involves, having the locations dialed in and that you do some optimization going forward. And what I mean by that is that we've looked at a lot of these projects like Coffin Butte, like the one in Brooks, Oregon, like ones in foreign nations where we're talking landfill uses or coal plant restoration, or just simply power plant restoration at all, overhauling, to the point where it might not even be an issue of coal, oil, gas, whatever, just literally that some countries got a power plant asset that just isn't running anymore, or it runs so poorly and inefficiently and dirty. Mongolia is a great example there in the negative sense, where they have 1945, 40 to 45 World War II vintage Russian boiler steam turbine plants for coal. And so there's kind of no wonder, and that the equipment's reliable and it runs and it's great, from that vantage point, but it's not environmentally advanced. It's not advanced from the standpoint of ultra high efficiency or ultra clean performance. And what's happened, this is a really disturbing example, but it's why we get involved, is that you've had, and you can check the metrics, they say it's between 400 to 600 children under the age of 5 die every year in Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, due to respiratory illness directly caused by the air pollution. And the doctors work with those children to give them, asthma relief and all kinds of different things they can help with. And it just gets to a point where they just literally cannot breathe. And, think about that. You have a child, you're raising them, and to have, it's hard for me to watch any person suffer. But can you imagine having your own child just die in your arms because they can't breathe because of the pollution? So we come into a place like Mongolia and say, hey, you know what? We can change that. It can be cleaner and more profitable. And that started, not really started, but it was part of the ongoing culmination where we have these map systems. And some of you have seen them. We've got great stuff for Africa, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The Middle East, just phenomenal stuff where we've modeled all kinds of different optimization for countries like Oman, where we have a great partnership, the MCA, to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Turkey, Israel, just stuff we put together for Palestine, stuff we put together for Egypt. I know there's political challenges and people want to say this and that. I believe that there's peace and plenty. And I believe that that's a imperative that's true, and that we can knock down a lot of these barriers if we get people out of a position of poverty where they're so desperate, right? You make bad decisions when you're that desperate, to, hey, join our XYZ terrorist cell, or we're going to do damage to your family or anything, but more importantly is we'll give you something to do if you're a young man or even a woman. And so a lot of that is just filling that void. It doesn't even have to be something good, it's just something. And that's where we come along and say, no, it's something good. I'm here in Namibia. It's been fascinating as we go through and get settled in and talk to different people and workers at the airports and rental car and place we're staying, and different things like that, taking care of things. And you realize what the guy told us, and you can't really get this sometimes out of reading about it. You just got to be there, where he said, it's about the youth. He said 60% of our youth is, or of the population of this country is youth, and 70% of them don't have jobs, something like that in the rhetoric. So he's basically saying we're young and aggressive and we want to do something, and we can't even find work here. And it was just like, and I was just in the first hour of being here, get talking to a responsible young man and realizing, you know what, that's hard because he gets back to that thing. What was it in Shawshank Redemption, right? Andy Dufresne, great role there, and where he says, if he can't, or what a man really needs is something to hope for, right? That's everything ultimately is having hope, esperanza, you know. And then he says, but if you can't give him that, at least give him someone to love, and you're kind of thinking about what he's saying there in that scene. He's talking to Morgan Freeman, and then he says, and if you can't give him any of those things, at least give him something to do. And that always, resonated with me when he said that because it's kind of true, isn't it? Sometimes when you're in the doldrums or some bad thing happens in your life, and you're like, wow, at least I got something to do, go to work or something you have that you can call your own, and you can just kind of, even if it's running through the motions, putting some of your emotional stuff off to the side so you can just be productive, can just be therapeutic, and so sometimes a man does just need something to do. But what if you had all of that? What if you had something that you could believe in and was your vision, and then also, did something great? And that's what we bring now as Concentric. It's exciting. Rod, I love your comments. This is great. Yeah, the Brooks site, absolutely. Shipping on another sites from companies, just a cash cow for Republic being threatened. Um, I don't know. I know that I don't know. I don't know how to interpret that one because I know that yeah, they're struggling with trying to maintain the flow. I don't know if it's a matter of rewarding them for being threatened as much as just, trying to find a landfill that and an operator that says, hey, if there's a better way, let's do it. And, because the reality, and one of the slides we presented to him in the flyer, and I'll summarize it for everyone there. When it comes to waste energy, which again, it's not all we do. I mean, we're doing all kinds of other coal, oil, gas, regular fuels. The key is that we capture the flue gas emissions from any form of power generation we have to utilize those for additional feedstock production. And then the really exciting part is that applies to any kind of fuel. It's how we have this circular system, fuel or waste. So fundamentally, what takes place to have all that happen is simply integrating these biomimicry sciences that integrate very well, very seamlessly, very simply, and just continuing to industrialize those things and make them more valuable. And that's how kind of the patents have come together. It wasn't like, oh, just eureka, out of the box. Here's how we're going to process, calyx or the lithium refining. It's like when the who was it? I love that song by America. Tin Man. Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have. Obviously he already had a heart. Well, it's like when the Scarecrow gets a brain, and he's like the square root of 25 is 5, and the sides of an isosceles triangle are equal. He just rattles off these kind of trivial mathematical things. That's not what a brain is. That's not what is knowledgeable. To me, what's really knowledgeable and where real wisdom is where you apply things that work and how you have the grit to kind of go through to help people understand that this can be a deal for them. And some of this makes me think of it because I think Republic's a solid company. And the challenge is these landfills, they see the tipping fee and they make a lot of money. And then we come in and say, hey, there's a way you can make more money and do something cleaner and better. And now we can do that. We can stand behind it because when the graphene returns are there, guess what? The tipping fees don't really matter anymore. So even on an initial basis, they don't have to risk anything. They can just keep receiving those fuels and you just park right next to them. And instead of throwing in the hole, they give them to you and you convert them and everybody shares in the profits. And it's a way to win. And yeah, yeah, you got to have motivation. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. BJJ is gay. I'm not even sure what that's talking about. But very strange. So appreciate those feedbacks and comments. And what I found is exciting is it applies everywhere around the world, right? If you can develop a modular, scalable system that converts everyday fuels and waste of anything of carbon, whether it's wood, coal, garbage, sewage, whatever, it's just something carbon you can convert now, then you get to a point where it really is kind of one flavor fits all. And then it's just a matter of size. Is it one, two, three, four, five, or any number of modules to get there? It becomes a really scalable system. And that gives two huge advantages. One is you can start by not start small and just reinvent the wheel on a pilot plant because we've already done this stuff. But you can start small in terms of your capital investment to get one project at 20 million dollars makes 200 million a year in net earnings, mainly out of the landfill profits. But out of that, they also are doing their education and teaching and all these things to build up a society you start impacting. And that's what's going to be super fun to be a part of that, where it's people high-fiving each other in the workplace and say, "Well, this is an engineering firm." Yeah, you better believe it is. Engineering is a great expression of creativity, you know, and the ones who hold high places must be the ones who start, right? With Neil Peart out of uh, Farewell to Kings and that great song, Closer to the Heart, because that's what it takes sometimes to just grind through it all and keep getting better because you're onto something and you trust yourself because it makes so much sense. And that's what it takes sometimes. And so we've run into that in Africa. I'm gonna talk some about Africa because I'm here now and I've been there, I've visited and stuff. But I think if you look at a map of Africa, you obviously it's a giant continent. I mean, it's bigger than any other continent in the world. You could fit Russia and China and America in it together and still have room to spare. And the point is that yeah, it doesn't take long to realize there's a lot of resources there. It doesn't take long to see that um, uh, the um, the threat on those things is high because the people involved want to make sure it stays protected and prepared and ready. Because if you have those kind of revenue streams in an industry that's used to seeing 20 or 30% return at most, and you're talking 2 to 300, sometimes that just is disingenuous for those people, and they don't want to do that kind of thing. And I certainly don't want to do that. And um, we want to be the ones who can bring answers. And so, what I mean by not being the one to want to do it is that the we want to be able to go into these places, do the models, show them the projects, and then say, how do you want to get this done? And everybody in the room, when there's enough people, say, oh, I know the guy who can do that part. I know a guy who can do this. I know the leader there. And as we build that team, that's where the glue comes in naturally. Um, because, yeah, thanks, no distraction. So, what I'm ultimately getting at is with respect to Africa. You've got, for all intents and purposes, centuries of exploitation. You can mirror it in South America, and we're going to be coming out with the maps on that too. And right now, there's map sets, and then I'll get to Africa. We have Africa, the Middle East, the Silk Roads. That was kind of what became about during that Silk Road Forum, which we plan to attend again this year. And then we obviously have some stuff on the United States, Latin America, and one we just ended up putting together just like earlier in the week was Southeast Asia, that just was getting too big and amazing to ignore. And the point is where we've done enough upfront engineering on sometimes dozens of projects to optimize those and put legs under the vision. Like Thoreau said, great, you've built your castles in the sky, and now it's time to put foundations under them. And so that's the take that we're bringing to this work is that we've modeled all these plants in a modular, standardized format so we can calculate the benefits of them ecologically, environmentally, financially, economically, all of the above, and show why it wins on all accounts. In fact, we call it in some of the videos that are on the intro to the company. Don't miss these. We made them. think it was last summer, really. Yeah, in Oman there. Toledo did some great video production, but it's kind of like the, I flat on, um, you flattened out, something that was dynamic because you just kind of um, couldn't quite find a way to express it, or you make a great video presentation and you're hoping it would catch on, and when people come back and say, "Well, your stuff's just so profitable, we're not used to seeing that, and so we just don't understand it." And I think of, people that we built great relationships with. I think in Oman, that's been kind of the main response. And China as well. For them, it doesn't even get into a discussion. They're just like, hey, when that curtain falls, let me know because I'm out the back door because I don't want to be tied in with that. And that's part of the whole thing, that why people are challenged by what we're offering is because it's like it's so good that then you have to be accountable to realistically give some of it away. And that was music to our ears. It always is. It's why we go out. We love nothing more than to find the guys who have gone through the ringer over these developments. And it's not just individual engineers, whatever, it's people and individuals and companies who've just been bludgeoned for their efforts to try to bring forward these great opportunities. And so, that's who we're looking for, is people who can champion some of these projects. And meanwhile, we put our nose to the grindstone stone and put things together based on these, high value engineering documents that are really just customized, optimized engineering solutions that we can just plug in now into that system because we know how to build, operate, maintain them, and design them like no one else can. And so that's where the money's come from, and it's awesome. And so the the biggest challenge with all of this is that then how do you build that consensus? Um, how do you build the consensus for people to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this? It makes sense. Rod, another great question. And we've got a document that's been widespread. In fact, it's even in on the website downloads. And it's called an FAQ&A about graphene. And the reality is that, again, it's kind of that catch 22, that multiple plants have been built and operated for up to a year worth of data for the graphene production. But because those sites weren't owned by Locust or us, the owners have rights to those things. And one of them is kind of running circles around, and we're kind of like, hey, let's dial this in and do something. So we're talking to those folks. But in the meantime, yeah, the opportunity to have the right name, the situation, we've tried to make that available, through some of our channels there in some of these foreign nations, and how we put all that together. And so with that, it's kind of like we can be in the driver's seat by producing enough graphene to, take a lead position in the global marketplace, even with just a few of our units, and we have thousands in back order. So has testing been done? Yes, and it's been utilized, but not to the extent. We write about that. One of the questions in there is, what would it take to get all the right certifications and everything? And there's some expenses involved. In fact, some of those finance companies looking at doing that have even said they would finance us getting that data together. I'm not really sure, who to trust in that scenario. So we're kind of letting things go, take their time. But again, what are we doing? We're identifying real projects, putting real proposals together up at a very high level. And these are all to the point where this is commercially proven equipment that a healthy, not even an extraordinary amount of due diligence says, yeah, this is real. And so, in fact, I'll keep rolling this out too regarding the Southeast Asia development. I'll just kind of lay it out on the table. We finally had a group from India come in, and thanks to Srinivas Jay, our consultant there, who's showed a lot of tenacity, man. I really appreciate your focus because he's gone through the ringer with us where he's talking to traditional lenders and they just look at it and, they just don't like what they see as a potential. And so they've got to put it down rather than just let you go. And that's sad to watch. Um, it Yeah, I think why I'm a bit maybe melancholy. Yeah, it's like not so much jet lag, but we just traveled for like whatever it was, 28 hours or something, and we're here. And we set this up where as you guys know, that this is um, a situation where we are making the connections with the high enough people to get these opportunities heard, right? Because anybody can kind of just, make noise and yell about spreadsheets, but when you've got real engineering data and operational performance figures on it, and you bring in 90% funding like we have with McKinley, and they financially insure the remaining 10%, you get to a point where some of that due diligence is relevant. What we need are runners. Figure out the science later if you want. Doesn't say that, but at the same time, it's what really matters, right? To just go solve these problems. And so that's what we're bringing. So a group from India finally came in, and more details on them soon, but they're building these. They have some technologies, and we looked at them. They asked us to look. That's kind of where some introductions came, and we're like, yeah, those worked. It's good tech from the 1980s. But it's not. Look at what the widespread theme is: maintenance and demolition stuff, and all the costs associated with everything going on with managing those solid fuels and the ecological performance and all these different things that are just in those models looked at nothing but just kind of a thorn in the side. Well, you got to just be accountable there. And you turn into this, environmental department of a company to resolve those things. And they're always understaffed. They're just scrambling around trying to show up for another couple of job site things or something when they could be around just making a case for the started revamped technologies that are restarted. So we're looking for winners like that, and that's always an ongoing thing that you scratch your head about because then you see billions moving through for people and technologies and lives that aren't even that focused. Every life is significant, but they're not that focused on advancing, and that's kind of what's happened. So this India group came and said, we want to do all this stuff. We got a multi-billion-dollar sales platform, and we're staying up late. Don't be the line guy, and you know who I'm talking to if you're doing some of that kind of stuff. Just don't. Just let this propagate because it really does have the answers. So what are some of those answers then? Let's look at some date situations. You have obviously Africa is got, we've just talked about it. It's hard to know really where to start. It's such a big animal to try to take care of. And we're doing that. The group that approached us, you'll hear more details later. They're doing some other waste energy, biomimicry stuff, a lot related. What they don't have is something as hardcore and solid as the graphene potential, which is, you know, can be scary because when people are thinking about what are the implications of doing something so profound, that it can seem overwhelming. But then common sense says, wow, this is just the icing on the cake. It better be good, right? Why else would it be icing? You're not going to go, oh, look at this beautiful cake we made. Now we're going to like make a dung flavored ice stop. No, you're not going to do that. You're going to put the best imaginable, cream cheese filling on top of a carrot cake or whatever you have going on. Some awesome thing that's just phenomenal with cinnamon mixed in or whatever. You're going to dress that off and make it look fantastic. And so why get criticized for, there's just some backward logic, was it like fuzzy logic or pretzel logic, that Steely Dan talked about. I mean, people sometimes think through things and say, what are you thinking about? So they come to us a lot in a lot of cases, and the Middle East and Georgia and the Silk Road area. I'll get some of those things out to all you guys, and you can choose and think about them and see what you want. But we're still the only company I'm ever aware of that is like got the um, in uh, Yeah, okay. That's interesting on the cement because it's really it depends on the mixture and throwing it in ready mix at a smaller level. There's been great articles written about how it's a game changer to the cement industry. I think it's a matter of mixture. I think in the long run, it doesn't really have that big of an effect on pouring it and using it in the way either a ready mix bag or someone doing, pump trucks, whatever. It really doesn't have an appreciable difference on that. So I would say whoever's had problems with that on graphing, they're maybe using the wrong amounts or maybe it's not the right material. Because we've even done, in fact, in that FAQ&A document, there's things where Graphene oxide is kind of a real common one that's used in the cement industry. They're trying to even make, you know, uh, capturing flue gas from the carbon dioxide processes, the cement kilns themselves. And we have that. That's what we're able to go after the cement kilns for. It's like triple dipping. They got the calcination, the CO2 produced from breaking down limestone, plus CO2 from any power generation used to create heat for that, plus any other carbon dioxide emissions from any of the affiliated processes. And there's always some because everyone's trying to kind of pass the hot potato around. So we could say the buck stops with us. Let's go use it. And so what happened is that, and hopefully I'm back, guys. I just went back to send that link out. They don't really have a, like in Google Meet, there's, the talk section, you can put the notes in the thread, but that stuff's out there. There's a link, and maybe some don't see it, but if on our webpage, very front page at the top, there's a section about resources, I think is the title of it. And there's a section in there, a subsection that has the UPLs that are involved in all. And they really make me frustrated because, they're missing the point of what we're really trying to do. But so here's good. Thank you for that feedback. The main thing going on here is that we've now applied in all my backgrounds to say this, and I'll go a little bit over because I said I started late. And I appreciate all of this, but here's the deal: we're coming in now with these interactive maps, and we're going to have and Jocko, I'll get to your questions there. You bet. We're going to have, and we have it now, kind of like what we emulated in the past over the uh, you know, having the internal ability to go deliver on a project. And then instead of just being like a sales rep trying to sell some equipment, and that matters a lot because percent back in the 80s into the 90s, GE Capital had this going for them too, where it's like you're vertically integrated so that if you're GE Capital, you want to finance some GE equipment being sold to power plants because you're kind of almost double dipping. Because the when you get the revenue stream back or the tax credit incentive for being the spearhead agent, you can, you're more incentivized to kind of keep that sort of communication cryptic rather than share it with the world where everyone can be allowed. And that's our philosophy, and it always has been. And we've really laid stakes in the ground on it because, yeah, and the question, like, is the India project happening? Yes, absolutely. The thing is you got some of the metrics in the world. You got to look at the top 10 largest countries by population in the world, right? India's actually passed up China now. And then after that, you have, America and Japan still up there. And there's, all kinds of backgrounds and references of people that could come in and take care of that. And rather than just deal with it that way, what we're trying to do is show that, hey, if you have, like the Why Pearl Buck Matters document that's available on the documents downloads as well. Because if it's about a lot more than just the Belt and Road Initiative and debt trap diplomacy, if 40% of the world's people in their nations are the core exhibitors of it, maybe they're onto something, or maybe they're in need of what we can bring to them to really create stewardship, which it becomes more and more essential the larger the scale you're doing. That's the hint to the whole human race. We're doing all this work there that's so vital and important, and it's so essential, and that's why it's vital. So here's the breakdown. Yeah, a lot. So I was going to say, so yeah, the projects are going to happen. I mean, when you have 40% of the world's population, China and India, at some point, someone's going to just realize we have to do something better. We're trying to be the slacks, and so yelling about it up front is going to somehow keep land, off the number. Um, help us do it right. And that's what it ultimately boils down to because you've got places that can do this work. And for us, it extended into Africa, the Middle East, the school, the Simple Payback Forum read, to in Istanbul, opportunities. We're talking to Turkey about all these different things that go up into that platform. And what goes on is that, like, even this stuff with respect to Namibia how it happens. We meet the ambassador and a couple staff members to the prime minister here in Windhoek, and within a conversation that lasts a couple hours, and over the course of 2 days to get back for follow up, they're just like, we were told, that Concentric's got a different approach to things, and this is pretty remarkable. And then the question is, how much money would it cost? And we literally said to them, like, nothing, we're going to raise the capital, but it's why we need signed agreements so that the capitalists can know where they're putting the money. Well, in the course of that, we've talked to all the people involved and the people who own some of the softer reasons for, soil conditioning, water treatment, whatever, that we have advanced methods in. If that's all they focus on and that's the door opening into working with these companies, then we all jump at the opportunity, to be all things to all people, but the key parts to one, to all, like the Apostle Paul said, just have wisdom and insight. If you have the toolkit to give people every message, not tell them what they want to hear, but tell them what's possible and feasible and why it matters to them, it'll change things a lot. So going forward, here's what we have is, I mentioned Southeast Asia with the India company, the Silk Road region from Mongolia down through Georgia as one wing of it is really untapped. There's I'm disappointed in this, and it's kind of one of those things that just happens. But Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, because they throw billions at all kinds of stuff, and they act like their bill rights is important somehow. And I just I'm sorry about that, but we're still not going to recant and say those things aren't valuable. And so the Silk Road, the Middle East, peace and plenty. These are a lot of materials I've posted online, and I will again at the end of this talk. I'll make sure those are available. And the, I guess you know, the when you look at things that can change the national economy because people just aren't applying themselves, you run that risk. We say, well, this is crazy. It's too good to be true. But you find the people, the winners on the fringe, you say, you know what, I know it's real and true. And that's cool. You guys have put it together. Here's who could be good working cases for that. And that's what we're really building on. The That's I think that's a funny joke there that you got. So here's what we got. Yes, Ivor, good to see you, buddy. Thanks. So here's what we've got with respect to Africa, especially, is you've got this region that is, larger than Russia, China, America, India, even put inside of it several times over. Amazing natural resources and kind of a culture that's either been, taught to just feel like you're a victim so you can just later on cast back hatred and all the different things that have gone on into overreactions over that. And I'm not marginalizing anything. I'm not marginalizing any behaviors, but I know that there's times when what do you want one generation to do about someone else, some other generation who maybe made some massive mistakes? Well, stop, right? Stop them. And so that stuff is what really matters. And to just continue to make it improvements and under this all game sum model. So what's happened is we had in and if you check the map of Africa, I'm going to try to make these maps more readily available on simple downloads. I post them all throughout LinkedIn, and they're working models all the time. They update as new countries come in and what have you. So I'm open for different ways people might want to see that. Usually it's in one page and some links, and it's kind of the maps look like this and pretty simple to look at and giving people some information that there's a lot there. We just need some buy-in for some alliances. But Africa, especially Botswana and Namibia, just kind of like Kenya and Tanzania on the east side, those on the west are just like they've got their act together in a lot of ways. They're working for independence and they're really ripe to have, truly superior technology come around. And that's where it gets exciting in a blend. So like we've already seen your vision. Now we know how to go do it. So let's get started. So we'll have more details on that as we go, but we've got meetings at, parliament level, prime minister level stuff here through people we met. And you always want to, it's funny to me, and I'll lead with this. I know it's three after here. We'll cut it a little less than an hour overall. But one of the things when you analyze due diligence is always ask yourself, one group is always trying to get more, here's more information, more, 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 trying to tell you what's available. And a lot of times the world kind of rejects that guy, thinking, oh, he's talking too much, or he does this, or I don't like him, I don't understand. He talks different language. He's an engineer, he's not an engineer, whatever. Just people grab onto something. But if you're a reasonably healthy listener, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That some people just have that gift of being able to say something that really matters in a way that moves people. And I don't know, I just shoot from the hip, really. I just ask to be anointed with truth and what really kind of matters. But I will tell you this, that when you look around, you can find people like that that have just been almost slaughtered, but they haven't given up. And those are the world changers. And they're the ones who've already joined us and are going to be joining because we're asking for a lot, but we're asking to do it in a really efficient way. And that's what really matters. So I'm sorry if this has been still somewhat elusive, all kinds of details coming up about what we're doing. You'll see fruit of that too, and where money's coming from and different things like that. And it's always a great example that, could just go on kind of forever too. But I wanted to give some of that background and to look for those maps if you haven't already seen them, where we've got way over half the countries in the world have had serious models done where we're showing them what's possible. So with that, I will just leave everyone greetings from Windhoek, Namibia, where we're out changing the world. And how do you change a paradigm? One person at a time. Talk to you soon. Have a great week, everybody.